G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. Now I've got a couple of mates in town, so if this video does come out early or late, I do have a lot of social stuff on as well. I did laugh at those who have seen the fail that I had yesterday and me reading off my teleprompter and may have mispronounced something that I had written incorrectly. Or was it a success? Because at least some of you got a laugh out of it. But today, as always, we do have, of course, a lot to go over. We need to look at the maps, of course, in the north, in Kursk. We need to look at the east, and then we need to look in the south as well. What we have here is we do have a number of different maps that show some similar changes, some different changes, but as well, what I do have for you today is a number of geolocations as well, and that gives us a better idea of where the Russian forces or where the Ukrainian forces are operating. We overlay that with the maps. Again, then we get a better idea. We need to talk about the potential of ceasefire. We do know that President Zelensky is going to the US to display a peace plan to both current President Biden, as well as both candidates. And we're not exactly sure at all what's in that, but we'll look at what German media has said and what then Ukrainian's presidential advisor has pushed back on that as well. We need to talk about Ukraine's ability to strike longer range into Russia, see if that will get signed off that they can use US or UK weapon systems, and if they can't, how that will look through further campaigns against Ukraine's energy systems. And we talk about choppers. But I mentioned then the US presidents. And of course, there has been another assassination attempt today by Ryan Wesley Ruth, a second failed assassination attempt on the former President Donald Trump. Now, I'm sure you've seen this and this is nothing new news to you, but I will just talk about this for a little bit. How could we ignore it? Aussie Defender put this up. Ryan Wesley Ruth, the suspect identified in today's assassination attempt on former US President Donald J. Trump at West Palm Beach, is said to have been heavily involved with the Ukrainian International Legion, which he had previously assisted in the recruitment for in 2022 when he was interviewed by Newsweek in Romania. And there was a lot of stuff online, both of his Twitter, his Facebook, his Instagram, then furthering recruitment, talking about this, doing interviews, all this. So of course then conspiracy around this, as we do know, is going to just run wild. Now, one thing I will say in this is there's a lot of people, especially back in 2022, who went to Ukraine to become, I guess, somewhat relevant because the news was so just there at the time. Everything was there. And there was so much money flowing in that there was heaps of people there for the wrong reasons, just collecting donations, sitting in a bush, taking a photo, thinking they're on the front line. And there's a lot of lost people went and did this, I presume, like this bloke as well. When I was there, we referred to guys like this as, I guess, fictional characters, but building up who they were. And there was a lot of professional grifters, of course, massive amounts of donated money flowing in. Legitimately, a lot of people like this did way more damage to Ukraine's reputation than full-blown Russian propagandists. But again, one thing I want to talk about in this is he actually was tweeting about recruiting guys from the Afghan National Army, the ANA, who were trained by the West in Afghanistan to come and fight in Ukraine. Now, whether he had any contacts there, I don't know. I can't prove that one way or the other. But to be honest, I've actually spoken about this, that it might not actually be a bad idea because, of course, a lot of those guys that we trained and they stopped fighting and Taliban took back over are being hunted down still to this day. I have speculated before that could either Russia or the West actually offer guys like this security, safety, maybe citizenship somewhere to go out and fight. And some of those guys have been heavily trained and have a lot of experience as well. But one thing I'll say about this is every time something like this happens, whether it is a physical thing like an attempted assassination or just a hit piece, it just seems like this actually increases Donald Trump's chances and odds of winning. Like we saw with the kid that got smoked a couple of months back trying to shoot Trump, I think the media has a lot to blame for this, and as well political opponents. And it does prey on unstable people and push it further than it actually should be. And in my opinion, this is my opinion, the media and the political opponents have fueled so much of this and have some responsibility here through their own propaganda that Trump is the boogeyman, that he is some sort of evil dictator that we have seen before in the world. And this became very obvious to me when back then when that guy got smoked trying to shoot Trump. I posted on Instagram words to the effect of, regardless of what you think of Trump, whether you love him or hate him, in a democratic process, nothing like this should be celebrated or be happening. Now, what became very clear to me very quickly was the amount of messages that I was getting back along the lines of, well, wouldn't you shoot Hitler? Wouldn't you shoot Stalin if you had the chance? Or wouldn't you shoot Mao? And it became obvious to me that this is literally how people have been persuaded and how the media and political opponents have actually framed Trump. But love him or hate him, whether you're going to vote for him or vote for someone else, I don't care. Learn some history. If you think that someone taking a shot at Trump would be the same as if someone was risking that to take a shot at someone like Hitler, you need to go away, reassess, learn some history. But what I say is, I think the political opponents in this, the media, the rage, clickbaity media too, have framed this in a way that it is actually further radicalising people. And this is why we're seeing multiple assassination attempts like this in only a few short months. But that's the last, at least if more comes out, I'll speak on that, but for this video. So what should we speak about now? Let's actually have a look at some maps in here. So of course, here's Ukraine, the center. Here is the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 14, the Czech new territory being occupied by Russia in the last 24 hours, the green and blue territory of which Ukraine has either pushed back the Russians or Russia has withdrawn out of, except in Kursk. The blue is area that Ukraine occupy up here. Now this map, we basically don't use it up in here because it just hasn't been keeping up on the Ukrainian gains. The Russian retaking territory in here just hasn't been keeping up. Now, one thing I found very interesting was this photo has been floating around a lot of the pro-Ukrainian groups. Kursk nuclear power plant in the lens of a Ukrainian UAV, in the lens of a Ukrainian drone. Now, remember, this is still a long way away. It's still some more than 40 kilometers away from where this is, I believe. But remember, right in the beginning that I was told that one of the main goals was to actually get the Kursk nuclear power plant and have that as the major piece of leverage. Because remember, this has always been spoken to about leverage in here if there was some negotiation down the line. And what is here now compared to is if Ukraine occupied a nuclear power plant, leverage would be significantly different. So was that the goal in the beginning and it didn't go that far? I don't know, but interesting to see that come out. And I fear that these nuclear power plants, whether the KNPP in Kursk, the ZNPP occupied by Russia down in Zaporizhia, I think will become more and more relevant later into this war if we ever see some level of attacks or false flag attacks or whatever happen. I'll just keep an eye on all of these nuclear power plants depending on which way the trajectory of this war continues going. Now, let's have a look on this map, and we're going to go across to then Noel Reports' map. Now, what he does show is a second front line opening out of here, of course, in between Tyantyino and where then the main body of this force has been. So Ukraine is pushing across these borders in here, pushing Ukraine into Russia in here. Now, we can see this filling in here as well. And the reason why this is filled in, and I'll use then Noel Reports his own geolocation right here, is a video that has come out from in here. Now, what we see, and I'll show you this video, is a Ukrainian armed column here moving under fire of the Russian artillery forces in here, moving through then this open territory. Therefore, that has come into the blue check. But I do have another interesting piece of footage. Now, this piece of footage has been shared around everywhere of a Ukrainian airstrike against a building said to have Russian soldiers inside of it here. And I'll show you this footage and that building being destroyed by then that airstrike. But this footage has come out today. It's always the difficult thing with footage is we assume the day we see it is the day, or it's the day it's released is the day it happened. Again, most things are going to be fairly quick. But this is where this is then geolocated to, is in the middle of Veseleri in here. But if we zoom in, where we actually are speaking about is then right in around where my cursor is here. So it should, depending if that footage is new, this is still either red or at best grey. Again, we're not 100% sure, but could this be the other areas of where Ukraine are following up attacks from this? Because, of course, we saw this large Kursk operation. We've seen the Russian counter. We've seen the Ukrainian counter in here. And will we see further attacks go on? Because we were surprised not to see when this started stabilizing and stalling. We were surprised that there wasn't then further leading up attacks from the Ukrainian forces. Remember, it needs to be successive and simultaneous to reintroduce maneuver warfare back into then the war. Now, let's have a look and see how this lines up then with Syriac maps, our old faithful. Now, again, what he's showing is Vasilyev is still red, like that footage I just showed you of where there was apparently Russian presence. Also showed that Ukraine had some level of attack on a second axis out here. So this is the Gloshkovki district attacks of the Ukrainian army and the axis of Vasilyev and Medvedeni were repelled. So he's saying that they were repelled. They came in and got stopped somewhere. That there were clashes at other areas then around where Kotonevsky is. So this then front here out from Snaggost, but that this was just localized fighting, no changes in the map. But down around Borky, he is showing that there was then ground taken back by the Russian forces as well. So you see Borky right in here, that it's around then this area, that Suja district recaptured the locality of Borky. So we do know Borky in here, there's been some back and forward, some different maps showing difference, but again, we'll get a better idea as it's going. Another piece of footage has come out through Russian pages today, showing then Ukrainian prisoners of war taken by the Russian forces, and we again see another Wagner PMC flag. And what we have spoken about is, like I had told to me down in Chasiv Yar, that the VDV, the paratroopers, were being led by some more experienced fighters from Russian Spetsnaz or from mercenary forces as well, from contractor forces, as well as a force multiplier as on the ground, as well as command and control and experience. I was told that for the airborne down there months ago in April, and then we see the airborne up here and those flags then popping up. I think it's probably much of the same case. And I want to speak about choppers. Now, this has been coming out and celebrated and this and that. And again, I've spoken about this in very similar cases with Australian choppers. Ukraine wants 12 Viper attack helicopters spurned by Slovakia at an estimated $600 million. US State Department approved the tentative foreign sale. Now, again, these could go onto Ukraine, but at $50 million a pop, what I ask is, what difference would this really make on the front line of rotary wing helicopters, the training that's actually going to have to take place to get these in, the amount of logistics, the amount of ground crew, all of this that has to then surround choppers like this? How much change is 12 going to really make? I think very little. And this is a lot of money. It's $50 million a pop. I believe that money could be spent far better in far more areas instantly rather than this. But it does seem that Ukraine is going after getting those helicopters. Now let's have a look at the maps in some other areas, and we do have a lot of changes on this map. But let's go to somewhere where it doesn't show a change first, because we have some interesting footage down here. Now this is Kamyansky, this is Stepnohersk. Anyone who's followed me for a while will know I actually delivered firefighting rescue supplies like Jaws of Life and stuff actually down into these areas in here at one point as well. There's a quick video. Oh, I've got the hiccups. A quick video on that as well. We get a geolocation just here. So we see Kamyansky, we see then this road come out. So just in around where my cursor is here, we have a geolocated video of a Russian reconnaissance group here. You can see running cans on weapons, so suppressors, cams, and you can tell that these guys, by their kit, by the way they move, are higher end forces. I don't know who these guys exactly are, but said to be a recon force here as well, and then doing a retreat under fire withdrawal then out of there. But we get that geolocation of where the forces may be. Should it be red? Probably not, just a recon group, but we do know there's at least presence around there, and we may see things move. Well, there has at least been enough to come out, because Syriac has shown movement in around Kamyansky as well. So up front, in the last few days, Russian army recaptured a series of positions in this locality. So again, we don't exactly know when that footage has come out, but he's showing down in here that a number of positions came back under control of the Russian armed forces in there. No change in Robotny around here, no change around Ukrainsk. We'll come down Ugledar, and we can see some major shifts on this map to the south of Konstantinivka. Again, a lot of the maps showed up to this road, but not as far across from here. Changes out Vodiani as well. We haven't seen in here move for a little bit, just to the east of Ugledar itself. We believe Russia's trying new access and envelopment to try and take Ugledar. So let's have a look on this map. Now, this is what we like when the maps bloody line up. This is the exact same area in here, just to the south of Konstantinivka. So we can confirm that that definitely happened. Now, out from Vodiani, again, this was shown yesterday by Noel and Suryak. Now it's being shown on this deep state today, so we can confirm that that happened. Like I say, if it's a Russian map showing a Ukrainian gain, I'm more likely to believe that, just like if it's a Ukrainian map showing a Russian gain, I'm more likely to believe that, if that makes sense of where the biases would then lie. So definitely some changes down in here, but we'll just push up a little bit. Now, we have Herovka, Krasnohivka, Hostre front. Remember, we do know that there was definitely presence of Russian forces in Hostre itself. Other maps say that Hostre has fallen actually under Russian control completely. Now, this is where we are sitting here. So these two reservoirs are right here, and this is this Maximilianivka right up in here. But what you can see is we just look from the north of here, that it's showing that this is fully connected and that this salient here has completely come under Russian control when we have a look at where these paddocks, where then this other reservoir sits as well. So the last street of Herovka was taken by the Russian forces, and there's a further push out to the west. But we'll wait and see what other changes come on other maps. Of course, this map today is showing that more of Ukrainsk is coming under Russian control. Doesn't show the movement out then on the western side that we have seen footage and other maps showing as well. So you can just see where that has then moved, and an increase of grey zone in to the south of Halenitskia as well. Now we'll keep pushing up. No changes around New Yorkshire on this. No change shown on Klishkivka, although many maps are showing further upon than the canal down in here. Now, come up Seversk front line near Sperny. We do see some changes, including Sperny coming under Russian control here as well, just to the east of Vivinka. Not shown in any of the maps that I have for you today. And then we come up Pishani front line. Now, we'll just step back yesterday to today to see where things are moving. Further westwards push. Again, what we've spoken about, we believe Russia is trying to get to then this river in here will create a natural barrier between a north and south force, making then a much harder logistical supply for Ukraine into Kupiansk and down into the south here, using the Oskil as a natural then barrier. Now let's have a look at what Suryak is showing today. So he is showing very similar area, at least more of a westerly push. So we confirm that that has occurred, as well as more out to the north. Now he's showing a fair bit more out to the north here, but again, Tabayevka, this front line in here, we've seen some shifts over a couple of days, and we do know that this front line in here, that things are moving over the last couple of days, and it will be interesting to see how that continues to develop over the next coming weeks. So let's have a look at what has been said. We'll talk about ceasefires. We'll talk about another couple of bits and pieces. Now, this came out from German newspaper or news source Bild. Zelensky will travel to the US the next couple of weeks to present his strategy to the US President Joe Biden, as well as presidential candidates Harris and Trump. Trump almost didn't make it to this. According to Bild, this includes both a demand to be able to use long-range weapons deep inside Russia, scalp ATACMS Storm Shadow, and the willingness of Ukraine to accept local ceasefires on certain sections of the front, and thus a temporary freeze on the situation. So ceasefires on areas of the front, a lot of people reporting, that is this saying that there would be a freeze along the lines of where this is sitting right now. Remember, like we've said, as far as like substantial movements over the last year and a half since Kharkiv, Kherson, I'm in the wrong directions, we haven't seen just like massive amounts of ground taken anywhere, just because of the amount of forces and the amount of dug in defensive fortifications as well. But Ukraine has pushed back on this. This is from the president's advisor to, of course, President Volodymyr Zelensky. Bild spread a fake. Bild did not see the victory plan, and none of the few people involved by the president in the preparation of the victory plan spoke to Bild. No one will present a Minsk III or any other format to the Russians. Ukraine is against freezing of the war, and the authorities of Ukraine are talking about it at all levels. And it is important for us that the US supports Ukraine's victory plan, not capitulation or freezing. Remember, JD Vance, in an interview only 2 or 3 days ago, did speak that if Trump were to get into power, most likely there would be a freeze along the current lines. And I've spoken about this before, that if you asked me, where do you see this war ending? When I look at the build-up of forces, industry in Russia, I look at the military aid donations and amount of volunteers and conscripts in Ukraine. What I say is I don't believe either side's having the amount that we'd have to see those full goals achieved. Likely where this war ends is very similar to where that line sits. Now, is this then giving up land? Is it frozen? What comes into play? I don't know anything beyond that, but I think as far as huge changes and taking Crimea and taking Donetsk or taking Kharkiv or taking Kyiv is a long way from where we are sitting now. The victory plan will be presented first to the US because the US will be able to ensure the implementation of its content. We will remind that Zelensky previously said that everything that is a frozen conflict in war, a slow war, a slow occupation, or a frozen conflict between the parties. So again, we don't know. But if that then war plan, the plan going forward, is similar to the 10-point peace plan that is, number 5 and 6 talk about 1991 borders, territorial integrity there, it's going to fall over. Russia's not going to listen to that at this point when they've got the artillery dominance, the manpower dominance, and are still taking land on every front line of which they are pushing on at the moment. That is an idealism plan, not a realism plan at this point in time. For that plan to become realistic, Ukraine would need to have massive manpower, conscription, huge rearmament of then those new forces, and be making ground on the front line, leading into having a more strong position at these negotiations somewhere down the line. But we will see. So Politico had this about winter, and this has caused quite a stir as well. And I guess this lines up with what we looked at of those power plants as well. As Biden deliberates, Ukraine's nuclear power plants are increasingly at risk. The risk of Ukraine losing the war this winter has pushed Washington and London to reconsider how Kyiv uses Western long-range missiles, but the US remains fearful of escalation. So again, speaking of that winter, and we know we're only a couple of months away. Now, US envoy to NATO, Kurt Volker, I would like to see a more forthright position coming from the Biden administration that says there is no reason why Ukraine shouldn't be fighting back. Russia's the one attacking Ukraine from all these facilities across Russia, so missiles into energy areas, bases, things like this. There is no reason that for there to be a sanctuary, but I don't think we're going to see the Biden or authorising the use of US missiles to strike Russian airfields, although the British might be allowed to proceed without US objection. So this guy's saying there's no reason why not to, but he's saying I don't see that Biden is actually going to let that happen. Again, we'll wait and see if that occurs. They fear this coming winter may prove to be a breaking point for Ukraine in the energy war, and that's largely because Russian commanders are adapting their airstrike tactics, having learned from their previous failed bombing campaign to collapse the country's energy system, and with the recent shipment of new Iranian missiles, that it will help them complement with those glide bombs with their fabs in targeting logistics and communications. And what this will then do is free up your more long-range strikes to then hit then the energy systems here, particularly an energy system, and says civilian infrastructure as energy facilities. Yes, is civilian infrastructure, can be military infrastructure. That classified is dual use. That can be targeted in war. Ukraine can target those areas in Russia too. Russia, by at least overall, can target those energy facilities. Whereas we have seen Ukraine targeting those dual use items such as energy facilities, oil as well, where they want to strike more of that if they get permissions to use these longer range strikes. Again, Russia tried to isolate these nuclear power plants, focusing on degrading Ukraine's energy transmission. To paralyse the 3 nuclear stations, it is game over for Ukraine in the energy war. If those can't be connected back to the grid, diminishing its warfighting capacity, crushing the economy and weakening its position if peace negotiations do ever commence. This is why then these are considered a dual-use item. Energy is used by the military as well, and of course, other systems. This is exactly why Ukraine wants to strike more systems in Russia as well. And if Ukraine has been paralysed from energy, again, if peace negotiations come forward, it's going to be even in a more weak position if the lights aren't on. If we aren't given the opportunity to target deep inside Russia and reach the Russian airfields, our chances of getting through the winter are not aren't so great. And this is from the former CEO of Ukraine's national power transmission, Ukrenegro. He agrees with this assessment. Speaking to Politico, he said that there was 3 factors that would prove critical for Ukraine this winter: the weather, Russian missiles, and Ukraine's ability to strike Russian airfields to interdict strategic bombers and fighters. His greatest fear is that it will turn to a repeat of late 22, which he truly feared they wouldn't manage to keep the lights on. And this could be in a far worse scenario than we saw in 2022. That said, even with the sign-off of the ATACMS, the Storm Shadow and Scalp, the bombers, these long-range bombers, especially your TU aircraft, but even your Su-34s, are out of the range of that. Like we've seen the US say that 90% are already outside the range of this. So this isn't going to just turn around, even if that is signed off. Although, yes, there are a lot of military facilities Ukraine could hit with these, but again, those are not within range of these systems anymore. This is why people say it should have been signed off more than 2 years ago. For their part, Ukrainian officials hope the prospect of the energy systems collapse will ultimately outweigh Washington's fears of escalation. So if it's going to collapse, that is more important to Washington than escalation. Therefore, we have to let this then escalate. But again, the ability of using ATACMS is not going to stop those TUs launching a missile that goes 1,000 Ks and comes into an energy transformer. Burns stressed that no one should underestimate the risk of escalation and admitted his agency genuinely feared Russia might resort to a tactical nuclear weapon in late 2022. There is no such thing as a tactical nuclear weapon. A tactical weapon is a rifle, is an artillery piece, is a this, is a that. No, nothing nuclear is tactical only. It is strategic straight off the bat. The main use of nuclear weapons is deterrence. If a nuclear weapon of any amount of size, of yield was to be used, it would strategically change the world like that. Therefore, it's not tactical. While Biden and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer brushed off Putin's threats on Friday, the US administration still appears to be trapped between 2 worries: the fear of how Moscow might respond if Western-supplied missiles start striking Russian airfields, and wreck projects of peace talks to get going, and alarm over the prospect of Ukraine losing power. So it's like, where will Russia change in this if these missiles are being used? As we know, a lot of the guidance, a lot of everything is coming from the West directly into those. And as well, if this does happen, does any potential of peace talks then go out the window with this as well? So again, it's much larger view than the US is looking here as well. Time isn't Ukraine's friend. And so you've got to give the ability to use the resources to defend itself. I think Russian escalation will be minimal because if they're going to strike Poland or the Baltics, I think that opens up a can of worms for Russia that it cannot afford. Again, like I say, I don't think that the escalation that UK is fearing, especially the US, has anything to do with a nuclear weapon going somewhere or a strike into NATO, Poland, or Baltic. I don't think it has anything to do with that at all. What I think their primary concern is does this eliminate peace talks for the foreseeable future? Will there then be further strikes somewhere else? Or will then Russia turn around and go, okay then, well, we're not going to strike a NATO facility somewhere, but we're going to give this weapon system or this technology to X party that is working as a proxy for a country of a country, Iran through to one of the H-men, more technology to then strike a NATO facility or something down the line then. Remember, just saying the only escalation is a strike within NATO is ridiculous. That's just not going to happen. Russia know that can't happen. It would conventionally be insane, as well as a nuclear weapon would just be insane as well. I think people looking far too small. You need to look at where other countries can escalate on Russia's behalf or proxy can escalate there too. There's a lot more than just the 300 kilometres of this front line that the US, Russia and the UK are looking inwardly on. This is an interesting piece too. Volker concurs. The president has a Cold War upbringing, this Biden, a 1980s mindset, says we must avoid war at all costs. It's probably not a bad mindset to have when we're talking major powers and nuclear weapons. I think he's stuck in that thinking. I also think that you have a team of people around him who are incredibly cautious and feel we can't afford to be in a conflict with Russia, that we need Russia for other issues as well. I don't think anyone wants to be in a conflict with another nuclear power, but we hear about this, that we need Russia for other issues as well, and that makes the people very unhappy when some of the US official figures talk about this. Now, in my opinion, in the future, at some point, probably the near future, the US, the NATO West, need some sort of relationship with Russia. That doesn't mean, like I say, and I quote myself on this, singing Kumbaya with Putin. No. But the rise of China in the past decades and over the next century is massive. China is outstripping the military industrial capacity of basically the rest of the world combined. Russia solved so many problems that China would run into if we ever had a protracted war with China, such as food, shoreline, ability to create a naval blockade. I think the US will want some amount of pull back on Russia in the form of lifting some sanctions, maybe not friendships, but a relationship then forming to try and at least slow down China's rise in industrial military dominance capacity as well, and not have then, well, to quote what Putin and Xi have said, a no limits friendship between China and Russia. But we do know that China has no formal military alliances or friendships, and I think the US want to bring Russia back somewhat under that sphere of at least influence due to how much it would actually benefit China to have Russia on its side, and of course vice versa. Again, it's the war in this is not this then front line. It could be seen as a NATO West versus South war. You could see many different areas of this too. Escalation doesn't mean that we see it on this map. It could be somewhere else, and it could be something that influences a decade down the line. Like, again, we have seen some of the US decisions and Russian decisions be altered due to other concerns. Anyway, legends, have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.